was when God first showed his long suffering on the scheduled departure date of 10/11/97. In the first rapture date God gave us, it was scheduled to take place in the Jubilee year. What happens in the Jubilee year? First of all, Jubilee year is every 50 years. The 50th year, the trumpet sounded. It's the last trumpet sounding in the 50-year cycle, which made it officially the last trump. Paul knew about the Jubilee year in the 50-year cycle, but when God gave Paul the revelation about us being changed, God changed the name. He gave it to Paul and dictated it to Paul. He used this expression: at the last trump. Moment. Twinkling an eye. At the last trump. Paul had never heard that expression. And consequently, Paul couldn't comment on it because he did not know what it was. He just wrote as the Spirit moved upon him. He did say, I'm going to show you a mystery. The mystery was, we shall not all sleep, we shall all be changed. I spent a lot of time over the years trying to establish the fact that part of what Paul wrote about, that's the only part that was a mystery of Paul explained. The rest of what Paul says in the next verse, in a moment, the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, all of those remain a mystery. Why did God do that? To give Paul's revelation validity. Keep in mind, this trip to come out again the message in a more impactful way, that the Old Testament requires, in the case involving God's people, out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let every word be established. You do not take somebody to court with one witness. That'll be at least 2, maximum of 3. You recall when you read when they had Jesus' trial, the Pharisees, in order to get a guilty verdict, they hired false witnesses. The false witnesses came in, they told the story, but they didn't brief them properly because the stories didn't match. One lie didn't match the other lie, which made their testimony invalid, but they still allowed their testimony. Had Paul been the only person to write about this, and he was, he wrote this in 59 AD. From 59 AD until 1994, God didn't say a word about the last trump. But Paul is the only witness, which makes Paul's testimony invalid. You guys understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay? It's only the work of the Holy Ghost and power of God to take that one witness and keep it alive in the community by itself till 1994. God also established or continued another habit he has. When a great event takes place in his calendar, he gives a 3-year early warning message. When the children of Israel were in Babylon, captivity, Jeremiah prophesied that they would be there for 70 years. Daniel was going through the archives because he had access to those kind of records. He discovered the writings of Jeremiah. He discovered his writings in 67, the year 67, 3 years before the captivity comes to an end. That's when Daniel prays that long prayer in Daniel and receives the 70 weeks revelation. God did the same thing. He spoke in 94 as a witness to Paul's message. According to his word, he said, in the end there would come prophets who would lay a foundational truths. Until that time, the last trump is just not really can be considered a truth at all, because only one witness for it. So God had to give a second witness. Now it becomes valid. And God still has this in the mystery form. Take these two parts here. Until I think around 2012, 2011, he revealed that part. 2007, if I'm not mistaken, was a Jubilee year. But God ignored it. And in 2007, God began to speak to us about the 2010 year, which stayed true with his format, using number 13. Go back to Israel in the year 31 AD, when the church was born. He made a prophecy and said that all these stones come up the temple that existed then, not one stone would be left on top of another. They'd be destroyed. Herod came in, not Herod, Titus came in, the Roman, and burnt the tabernacle, the temple down. He did it in the year 70 AD. That's when God first began to open up the message, number 13. From 31 AD to 70 was 39 years, or 3 times 13. When God first gave the revelation about the rapture in 97, the church began on Azusa Street, the church, the Laodicean church age, the 7th church, in Los Angeles in 1906, referred to as the Great 1906 Revival, or the Azusa Street Revival, or the Pentecostal movement being born. Every Pentecostal organization, they all trace their roots back to Los Angeles in the 1906 revival. It's a different work begun by the Holy Ghost. I read something on the internet, people say, we need to pray for revival. Don't bother. God doesn't need us to pray for revival. He starts when he gets ready. And every church age began with revival. Started by God, and then man gets into the mix. They find a formula, figure God out, how he works, and the revival dies. Has been one since then. 1906 to 1997, the Jubilee year, or the rapture year, was 91 years. or 7, number of completion, times 13. As you know, it didn't happen. In 2007, God began to talk to us about the 2010 rapture. What's the space? 13 years. And he maintained that 13-year notice for 2011, 2013. Now we couldn't figure out for a long time. So God told us we got a brand new covenant. 2000, the turn of the millennium. Then from that 2000, you go to 13. Then you look at another way. God's numbers start with 1. That's how it begins. So from 2001 plus 13, you get 2014. He has not changed his pattern all the way through, and how God has made this work out is, well, put it this way, we don't believe there's a God. He's been with us for the last, since 94. You should be firmly convinced that there's a God. He wrote this book, he invented numbers, and he speaks. Let's go to the last thing. He invented numbers. He made it clear to us that any potential rapture year for the church, that the last day of that year in the Jewish calendar had to take place on a Wednesday. And the rapture itself, or the Day of Atonement, under the law, to qualify for rapture year, that day had to take place on a Saturday. I use the same example sometimes over and over and make the impact, because I know what I got. But with us, here's a birthday on Sunday today. Next year, your birthday will fall on Monday or Saturday. I'm not sure where it goes. But it moves a day each year, right? How God did this, I'll never understand until I get to heaven. The year 2010, 2011, he skipped 2012, the year that the Mayans said something's going to happen. And God said the Mayans are in charge. The Mayans didn't have my message. They got a reprobate mystery. And to prove how much God he was and how much he ruled, he made 2012 a 90-day year, right? How many thoughts was going to happen in 2012? Raise your hand. Let's be honest. Did you expect something to happen in 2012? There's somebody lying here. Give one more chance to tell the truth. How many thought something was going to happen in 2012? Thank you. Thank you. Got 2 witnesses. I did. 2013. Do you see the series gathered around it? How that God made the last day on a Wednesday, the Day of Atonement on a Saturday, 4 out of 5 years. How can it happen? Again, go back to your birthday example. Your birthday falls on a different day each year. After 7 years, it'll fall on the same day again. Whereas God made these 2 days fall on 4 out of 5 years, that is almost astronomically impossible unless you're the astronomer. Unless you're the ones who put the planets in the sky, put them on their course, and on their speed, and line them up back in the distant past when you created them to make these days fall out like this. It shows very clearly, as the same Wednesday night, worthy was the Lamb slain before the foundation of the world. God had you and I in mind way back then, and when God actually made the universe and made the solar system, which is nothing but a great big giant clock, he set the clock to actually take us home in one of those 4 years. Then he told us, we had a message on why so many dates. Because I myself, I was getting a little frustrated with God. In the sense that, I said, Lord, you can string stuff forever. And he knew how I felt. He said he knows our hearts. He knows that we're flesh. He knows our breaking point. And I had my breaking point with God at that point, where I couldn't come to another day. And that Sunday, God gave a message out of 1 Peter and told us that the day of the Lord is 1,000 years. And 1,000 years is one day. And he said in that text that God is not slack concerning his promise. For me, the impact of that message, I thought it was promises. He said God's not slack concerning his promise. What promise did God make? To raise the dead. Then he told Paul, I got another promise for you, that everybody's not going to die. Some are going to be around for my coming. I'm going to just simply change them from mortal to immortality. But that's been his promise all the way through. You look at Paul's record, his history in the church. When Paul stood before King Agrippa and Felix, what have you, he said, I'm being called into court today for the sole reason of preaching the message of God resurrecting the dead. He said, I can't understand how somebody thinks it's a strange thing or a hard thing for God to raise the dead. That has been around forever. That was God's promise. Then he said that God's not slack concerning his promise, as some men count slackness. The average individual, look at this way, that God gave a date, 97, where all the criteria was met, then he didn't do it. He gave a date, 2010, where all the criteria is met, and he didn't do it. And he gives the appearance that God is just slack, that he's late concerning his promise. He said in the same text, that he's not late or slack. What did he say? He said he's long-suffering, not willing that anybody should perish or be lost. Now, that one verse, when God told us that, we should have figured out that this long-suffering God is going to play his cards to the max. Why wouldn't he pick this year? That's what a long-suffering person would do. But to get you saved and to get you ready, he made a case for every one of those years. He made a strong case for 97 that you couldn't doubt he's not going to come. We knew he wasn't going to come until that day. We had no notice. Those who were around back then had no notice, did we? No. We were some of the most depressed people in the world when it didn't happen. Our life was over. We expected to be gone. We had some bills we didn't pay. Some cases couldn't pay. We didn't worry about it, so we're going to be gone. We had some business that we hadn't taken care of. We didn't worry about it. We're going to be gone. Then by noon or so, on October 11th, when we're still here, reality began to sit down on us. He's not coming. I got phone calls from, I guess, well-meaning people, although some might think they mean well at all. They just want to let me know that, it didn't happen. Okay? And I had a letter from someone I respected in New Mexico, preacher. He said, the book you wrote was a wonderful book, but just admit that you were wrong. I wrote back to him. I said, thanks for the compliment in the book, but I wasn't wrong. I said, it wasn't my message. It came from God. And I said, I'm going back to the information over again, check the scriptures. And I said, nothing wrong with it. I said, in fact, I'll give you the job. You show me, in the book that was written this you got, you show me what was wrong to make God not come. And I have to respect his honesty. He said, brother, I can't. He said, that disturbs me more than anything. He said, I understand what you're saying. You're just saying you got a message from God. The message was right, it was accurate, it was true, but it didn't happen. He said, this is my first time being in this kind of situation with God. I don't know what to tell you. He said, I'm sure when it comes on again,